Good morning or good evening, everybody. And welcome to the Clean Energy Jobs Act Forum, hosted by 350 Chicago. My name is Larry Coble, and I am the president of 350 Chicago's board of directors. I and 350 Chicago founder Melissa Bryce will be your hosts for this evening's informational forum. The purpose of tonight's event is to provide information about the Clean Energy Jobs Act and the provisions inside the proposed bill for furthering a clean energy-based economy in the state of Illinois. It has been hailed as one of the most progressive clean energy bills ever proposed. While this bill is quite comprehensive and we can't talk about all aspects of the legislation tonight, we hope everybody in attendance leaves the event with a better understanding of the depth and breadth of the bill and the effect it will have on the economy, the energy sector, the varying affected communities, and the resultant jobs outlook in the state. Following our conversation, we will take questions from attendees. Melissa will be collecting the questions in the Q&A function and moderating the discussion. So if you have questions as we move along through the evening, please go ahead and feel free to place them there and indicate who you would like to answer the question. Now I would like to introduce our panelists. First is Representative Dan Deitich. He is serving in his second term representing the 59th District in the Illinois House of Representatives. He previously served as Vernon Township Supervisor and currently is a practicing attorney focusing on local government and election law. He serves on the Energy and Environment Committee in the House as well. Daniel lives in Buffalo Grove with his wife and 9-month-old son. Our second panelist is Jennifer Walling. She has served as the executive director for the Illinois Environmental Council since January of 2011, where she oversees the strategic direction and management of the organization and lobbies decision makers on environmental issues. The IEC is a founding member of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, and Jen previously served as the ICJC steering committee. Jen holds a bachelor's and master's degree in natural resources and environmental sciences from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She also received a Juris Doctorate from the University of Illinois College of Law and is an attorney licensed to practice in Illinois. Our third and final panelist is Carrie Liderson. She's a longtime Chicago journalist, author, and journalism professor. She writes for Midwest Energy News, and her work on energy, environment, criminal justice, immigration, and other topics has also appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, WBEZ Public Radio, In These Times Magazine, and other outlets. She teaches at Northwestern University, where she leads the social justice specialization in the graduate program and is launching a new investigative program there as well. She is the author of 5 books, including Closing the Cloud Factories, about Chicago's coal plants, and Mayor 1%, Rahm Emanuel, and the rise of Chicago's 99%. I would like to thank each of our panelists for agreeing to be here and providing us their time and knowledge regarding this important legislation. So to begin, I want to travel back in time a little bit to discuss the recent history of clean energy policy in Illinois, to have a brief explanation of the Future Energy Jobs Act, or FEJA, which took effect on June 1st of 2017. The following questions are directed at both Ms. Walling and Representative Deitich. We'll start with the representative. Briefly, what is the future, or what was the Future Energy Jobs Act?
So I'm actually going to pass this one over to Jennifer. I was not in the legislature when we passed the Future Energy Jobs Act. So I think this may be a good question for Jennifer to start with.
Yeah, I can start, and maybe Carrie, I know Carrie covered a couple of things that have come from this. Maybe she has some thoughts too, but definitely I was very involved with the Future Energy Jobs Act. The Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, of which 350 Chicago has been a member and IEC is a member, was really formed around 2014 in response to Obama's Clean Power Plan. And the Clean Power Plan would have had state-based climate and carbon reduction solutions throughout Illinois. And we proposed, very inventive with our naming. We started with the Clean Jobs Act, which I'm not sure if we introduced that 2014 or 2015, but it was passed in December of 2016. And this was a bill that included huge amounts of investment for renewable energy like wind and solar, $12 to $15 billion in new private investments for wind and solar, powering 1 million homes with solar by this year. It created the Illinois Solar for All program, which is a program that brings solar to low-income people. It created the community solar program before you couldn't have the program that had utility scale solar that you could just own 1 or 2 panels. There's a job training program with a particular focus on returning citizens and those who are from foster care that has trained hundreds of people at this point, most of which are people of color, and have huge graduation replacement rates. And just all in all, we saw an enormous growth within renewable energy jobs in Illinois. Prior to the pandemic in 2019, we were almost hitting 130,000 clean energy jobs, although there's some estimates that 30 to 40,000 jobs have been lost in the clean energy sector because of the pandemic. That is slowly ramping up, and then we'll get to the solar jobs cliff. But our big push during all of that was a real fix of the renewable portfolio standards, which had inadvertently been broken. So I was just very pleased to never say fix the RPS again, but hopefully I'll get to the point where I never have to say fix the solar jobs cliff again, which we'll get to. But I will talk about that there was controversy around that bill, because the only way that we could get that bill done was to have a package. And that package included subsidies for Exelon at a rate of $200 million a year to keep open the Quad Cities and Clinton power plant. And for us, it was a good deal because 70% of the items in the bill were related to renewable energy or energy efficiency, and the other 30% were either ComEd or Exelon items. To get any of our stuff, we needed to have a package at that time, but we have been working since then to really grow our power. And while labor is still a very significant stakeholder in all of this, definitely ComEd and Exelon don't have the power they once did. So we're really hopeful that we can get something that is really, truly a clean energy piece where we go. But that is some of the controversy around the Future Energy Jobs Act and the benefit that it brought to carbon reduction emissions in Illinois.
So, how is it foundational to the Clean Energy Jobs Act? How did it sort of spur this next iteration of clean energy policy in Illinois? Well,
I would say from an organizing perspective, we really learned a lot from passing the Future Energy Jobs Act. And one of the things that we learned, especially from our environmental justice and frontline partners, was that any legislation we needed to put forward should be really put together by the community, and it should be really ground up. And so right after the Future Energy Jobs Act passed, we still were really busy with implementation. We still are 5 years later. But in 2017, 2018, we held Listen, Lead, Share events throughout the state of Illinois. I think nearly every state Senate district, which there are 59 of, and had thousands of people participate. And in these sessions, we worked particularly with frontline community and environmental justice organizations to learn more about what their needs were. So there's differences in the barriers to electric vehicle usage in where I live in the north side of Chicago, to the south side of Chicago, to Bloomington, to Roothouse, Illinois. There's going to be differences in how barriers that people have to electric vehicles. And so we learned a lot about that from the different listening sessions that we put together. So we learned a lot about how to put together a bill from the Future Energy Jobs Act. And we also learned a lot about the things that we needed to do, which really included building our power, but also bringing great new legislators who were motivated to really do something about clean energy, like Representative Dan Diddick, welcoming them, educating them about these as they're coming in, so that we could have more of the power that we need to get closer to get a bill done that is really a true carbon solution.
Okay, so the Clean Energy Jobs Act, so moving closer to that current proposed legislation, I'll throw this one to Representative Diddick. This one, I would just sort of say, what is the Clean Energy Jobs Act? What is its purpose? And what would be your elevator pitch to describe it?
That is a great question, and I'll do the best I can because the Clean Energy Jobs Act it's truly a historic piece of legislation. It does so many things, it's actually quite difficult to describe concisely. What I would say is it not only rapidly modernizes our state's energy infrastructure into what I believe should be a model for many other states to follow, but it will also economically invest in our state's people, our state's community, in a way that will have very significant positive consequences for many years, many decades into the future. To me, some of the most important and impactful components of CEJA are what are called the just transition components. They provide significant targeted investments in communities that have been historically negatively impacted by environmental racism. We'll get to that, I think, a little later in the program. I can talk to those in detail. But big picture, CEJA will help us move to, by 2050, a 100% renewable energy infrastructure in Illinois. It would be a historic accomplishment, very important, not only on its own terms, but also for our state to do our part in fighting climate change, making sure we're building a community in a state that has clean air, clean water, and is sustainable for the future. So that's kind of the big overview. I know we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. Jen's very knowledgeable, a lot of them I will talk about as much as I can. I'm new to the legislature. I'm now starting my third year. I've served on the Energy and Environment Committee my entire time, and I've now been appointed the vice chair of that committee. It's an issue I'm very passionate about, and very grateful to give you as much of the knowledge that I have about the Clean Energy Jobs Act, because it's very important.
Well, just talking about that sort of transition to clean energy and efforts to fight climate change, Ms. Wong, what can you add to what he just said about what the bill will basically do to help us in that transition and help fight climate change?
Sure. So I think this is where we'll talk about some of the pillars of the Clean Energy Jobs Act. We did talk about about transition, which is the decarbonization of the power sector with the goal set by 2030. There's also 100% renewable energy by 2050, the electrification of the transportation sector, which now in Illinois is the largest source of carbon emissions. And then finally, a whole focus on jobs and equity. And as the bill has evolved, now it's nearly 900 pages. There's a number of items about utility accountability as well, because there are just certain ways that we're going to need to hold ComEd and other utilities accountable in order to move forward. I would say a piece that people need to know that's part of the bill and related to job transition is the way that we pay for renewable energy, which is different than some of the job transition parts because there's a coal severance tax, et cetera, and we'll get more into this later. But there is capacity market reform within the Clean Energy Jobs Act, and it has gotten some controversy about what it could do, but I'll tell you what capacity markets in Illinois do right now. Nearly $1.7 billion in Illinois is used to mostly subsidize dirty energy like coal plants to keep them open. So the Waukegan coal plant that is in Lake County, 100% of the reason it's open is not due to its selling power or the times that it is online. It's due to these capacity payments that are paid by through the grid for it just to remain open. And otherwise it wouldn't be cost competitive. And so how do we reallocate that nearly $1.7 billion that's being used on fossil fuels to be used in a better way is absolutely an essential part of what needs to happen to remove those subsidies to fossil fuels.
Ms. Linerson, what would you like to add to this conversation? I know you've reported a lot on regards to efforts surrounding the creation of this bill and the communities and interests involved. What have you seen from what you reported?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really a privilege to cover this as a reporter, as a reporter that has a beat. If something that happens on your beat becomes super interesting and big national news and makes your location in the Midwest, the subject of attention from all over the country, that's always rewarding and fun. And CEJA definitely did that. CEJA put Illinois on the map for solar energy, and solar companies from all over the country were flocking here to develop solar. And the equity provisions of CEJA, I'm talking now about the Future Energy Jobs Act, the previous one, those equity provisions were really ahead of of the curve, several years before every part of society was really trying to embrace equity and racial justice. So there was so much interesting promise and interesting and pretty amazing work that went into CEJA. And, not surprisingly, with something so ambitious, it didn't fully pan out on the equity or the solar front for reasons I'm sure we'll talk about. And then, so, CEJA, is so even more ambitious and more huge, and obviously aims to not only actually fulfill the unfulfilled promises of CEJA, but go way beyond on renewables and on equity and just transitions. So it's clearly, the skeptic in me as a journalist is like, is this really possible? Is this funding really going to work? Of course, there's other important entities that have concerns about it or don't support it. Because of some of the controversy that Jen mentioned. So I can offer more thoughts later, but this is really, but between CEJA and CEJA, this energy legislation saga that's going on here in Illinois is really historic. And also the collaboration between, a state with such strong unions, a state and city in Chicago with such historic and strong community organizations and NGOs and experts, and, a legislature that's had its challenges, but has also actually been able to get things done. All those factors coming together is, the process in itself is also pretty remarkable and pretty fascinating to follow.
Okay, so I want to get a little bit in the nuts and bolts of CEJA. And so, basically, how will CEJA change the energy industry landscape in Illinois over the next decade? I'm going to offer that both to Representative Didich and Ms. Walling. Especially like you've mentioned a little bit about decarbonizing the power generation sector, transportation. What should we expect over this next decade?
Maybe I could start with just some numbers. I'm kind of reading some of these off, but see, these are some of the estimates. A lot of these are going into 2050, but some of them are going into 2030, and maybe Rep Didich can talk about a little more of where we're going in terms of transition, but also how the clean energy political environment looks in Illinois. So just in terms of what we looked at, I talked about 100% renewable energy by 2050, et cetera. We're looking at investing $82 million a year in workforce development, investing a whole ton of money in former fossil fuel communities and workers, nearly $100 million, providing $50 million a year in rate relief, restarting the renewable energy sector. It's looking at building about 17,000 megawatts of solar and about 6,300 megawatts of wind by 2030. And obviously we're going to need way more than that to get to 100% in 2050. Billions in new investment to Illinois. The estimate is about 39 billion in new private direct investment by 2030. Creating equity preferences to make sure that we're diversifying the clean energy sector. Achieves that carbon-free power sector by closing the most harmful polluters first. It also expands electricity and gas energy efficiency, and there's so much, especially in the gas efficiency sector. It's looking at saving consumers about 700 million a year. Gas efficiency is really untapped. Natural gas has just been so low prices, but there's so much that can be done there, especially because gas is used to heat so many people's homes. So gas efficiency just huge. So we're looking forward to that, and especially with all of the price spikes in natural gas recently. It's almost putting 1.2 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030. And then just a whole bunch of things with ethics, utility, accountability, et cetera. And I think, leading to this, maybe Representative Didich can talk about, we're trying to build something to really build the political power of the clean energy sector. And I think this changes Springfield in a fundamental way. So just kind of pitching that off to him.
Now that is a very thorough overview of some of the greatest hits in the Clean Energy Jobs Act. The bill really, it does so many things. It's going to be impossible for us to get through every component in this kind of forum, just because it's 900 pages long. It does so many things, and if you we could talk about it for days without giving it the thorough treatment it deserves. Two other aspects of the bill that I want to make sure we highlight that I think are very important. One, building out the electric vehicle infrastructure in our states. If we build more charging stations, make them more convenient, that will make it easier and encourage more people to purchase electric vehicles, which is important not only for our energy infrastructure, but also for climate change as well. Our vehicles, our automobiles are a very significant contributor to the amount of carbon emissions going into our atmosphere. So anything we can do to transition more people off of gas using vehicles to electric using vehicles is something that would be very positive. The other aspect, we've mentioned the just transition components of the bill. And like I said, to me, it's maybe the most important part. And I want to tell you some of the specifics of what we mean by that. CEJA creates the Clean Jobs Workforce Hubs Network. What that is, it will provide training and job opportunities to low-income, largely minority communities. CEJA creates 16 hub sites to invest in those communities. These are places like Waukegan, Rockford, East St. Louis, parts of Chicago, other places in our state that have been systematically underinvested in. Those same 16 sites will also host what we're calling the Clean Energy Entrepreneurship and Contractor Incubator Network. So we can provide low-cost capital, back office support, mentoring, training, and other support to enable new contractors in those communities to be able to effectively compete for clean energy-related projects. It also creates the Returning Residents Clean Jobs Training Program for residents currently in custody of the Department of Corrections who are soon to be released, so they can obtain the skills to be a part of the clean energy economy when they are returning back to society. Creates a Clean Energy Jobs and Justice Fund to prioritize low interest, zero interest loans to minority owned businesses, contractors, and businesses serving those low income environmental justice communities. Taken together, these programs truly have the potential to revitalize areas in our state that are in serious need of additional resources. I think if this bill is implemented in the way that it's designed to, communities throughout our state are going to see such a significant economic revitalization. It's going to be something we're going to be very proud of at an on-the-ground level.
When we talk about sort of these economic impacts, I know that that we're going to try to get private investment into the state, but also how do we make these private investments, or how do we make those happen? And so, what kind of economic impacts are we going to see by CEJA coming in? Ms. Wallen, if you go ahead.
Sure. So, I talked about the jobs that we've already seen with Illinois, and I know Carrie's covered a lot about the interesting parts of economic coverage. So maybe teeing her up to think about what she might want to say here. But if you go to cleanjobsmidwest.org, this is a website that is really useful, that goes through the jobs in each of the Midwestern states that are in the clean energy sector. And as I said, in Illinois, before 2019, we were seeing almost 130,000 clean energy jobs in Illinois. In Illinois, clean energy jobs are growing at 6 times the rate of the overall economy. But we did see a lot of slowing, and not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the solar jobs cliff. Although I put that big jobs number out, and something like 75% of those jobs are actually in the energy efficiency sector, which you totally, I even, like, in thinking about it, maybe I didn't expect that. But energy efficiency is just really the quiet giant of all of this. You can't outsource doing a home weatherization. I mean, I just moved to a new condo, and I just, like, embarrassingly enough, I've been teaching about energy efficiency programs for a decade, and I've never used the ComEd one before I moved in. And I did the virtual home assessment, got a ton of free light bulbs, installation, etc. I used their website to help me buy a fridge and an electric washer dryer, so I can be moving away from natural gas. So those are all sorts of things that are in that program. But one of the things is that I'm really hopeful that we, especially if we may see federal climate legislation, the faster we go on passing CEJA, the more investment will be going into Illinois faster than in other states. We are really competing with other states. I think at this point, there's only one other state that has a Democratic governor and legislature that hasn't passed 100% renewable energy proposal, which is like super embarrassing. When I go to national conferences, I still have to sit at the passing 100% clean energy table instead of the implementing one, and I'm really embarrassed by that. So hopefully we get there. But we're competing with a bunch of other states to bring all of this new economic investment to Illinois, and we will see it, not just in terms of building solar, building wind, but the companies that find the Midwest a very convenient place to locate for all of their businesses. Illinois is just like a really major hub for all of it, and it'll be so important for us to be here, literally seeing billions of dollars in economic investment from this opportunity.
Ms. Ligerson, you've been reporting on these issues again about this clean energy transition. What are the key issues that the industry, the clean energy industry, workers and unions have been seeking to solve with CEJA?
Yeah, I mean, the whole focus on just transition, the coal economy phasing out. Illinois is a big mining state. Our mining employment's way down from past decades, but still significant. Coal-fired power plants, still have a lot of workers, union workers. So the concept of transitioning those workers to other jobs is a big one. And the just transition dialogues that have been going on and the components in CEJA are really interesting and sound really promising. But it's also, and then just beyond just transition, CEJA has so much focus on equity, which is so important and groundbreaking. And, the idea that both solar, renewable energy, and the jobs in this sector be accessible in an equitable way and actually help mitigate some of the environmental injustice of the past by really prioritizing environmental justice and marginalized communities and jobs. I mean, that's so admirable and so important, and hopefully will be exciting to see that happen. It's also so hard just by nature because we have so much systemic racism and just structural problems in our society, connecting even when there is money and there is renewable energy to be built, making the connections so the people that most need and most deserve those jobs actually get trained for them and get them is not easy, to say the least. And that's where this workforce hub concept comes in. Again, great idea, will be really challenging. The just transition, training workers from power plants or coal mines to do something in the renewable energy economy can be done, but it's not a given. The jobs aren't necessarily in the same place. They're not the same type of jobs. So there's just so many challenges, but the whole shift to clean energy is a huge challenge, and we're not going to get anywhere if we don't try to do these really challenging, complicated things. And I'll leave it at that for now. I could maybe talk more about sort of the union part of it and other labor issues later if you want.
Sure. One thing that I know that CEJA had a problem with, or there was an issue with, it was running out of funding. And so I guess the question I'd have on that is, what kind of funding streams will be used in CEJA? And are they, I don't know, I don't want to use the term perpetual, but how do we keep them continuing to fund the work that we need to be done for subsidizing different worker training, incubators, those sort of things? Ms. Wong, you want to take that one?
Sure. I hope I'm not stealing this portion, but so there's basically three big pots of energy within the bill. So the biggest is our suggestion. I talked about capacity market reform, and I talked about taking that $1.7 billion that is now being used for fossil fuels within the state and reallocating that to renewable energy, and that would require us to basically create a state capacity market where we would be directing our own energy future and choosing which sources that we want to move forward. This issue with capacity has gotten even worse under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission under Trump, where those commissioners voted on something that created a 6-lane highway to build new natural gas and subsidize fossil fuel even more than previously. So really important, and that's a bunch of money. We already have funding that is moving forward under the current renewable portfolio standards that everybody pays on their electricity bill. We're running into this solar jobs cliff because the long-term power plan for Illinois was late. And so there is a source of money that both should have been extended by the legislature, but also sources of money that we've run out of. And, you know, this, like, we need to do a simple fix, a simple date fix within the state legislature to fix that solar jobs cliff. So that's really important. But with the job transition pieces of the bill, there's a fee that's placed on electric sector power plants. That's a pollution impact fee that's based on how much pollution they create. And then we also are we are the only one of the top 10 coal producing states in Illinois that doesn't have a coal severance tax on the coal that we mine from the ground. Actually, Representative Diddick has introduced a bill previously on the coal severance tax, but this is also a part of the bill that funds job transition. And the coal severance tax in Illinois at 6% would average $70 million a year. Like I said, we are the only state of the top 10 coal producing states that does not have a fee on the coal that leaves the state. And we don't even, most of the coal that we mine in Illinois is not even burned in Illinois. Like, we're sending it to China, a little bit to Europe. There's a teeny tiny bit in Illinois and only a teeny tiny bit even in the United States. So we definitely need to be taxing that. Anyway, that's a little editorial there, but that is quite a bit of the funding that is contained within the bill to meet the targets that we need to meet. And then there are a lot of consumer benefits for all of this. I mean, energy efficiency, you spend that money, but then you save it. And so, you know, this is something that also can create a lot of savings for consumers by lowering their energy bills.
Okay, so now I want to turn towards equity issues. We've already mentioned some of these issues of different communities receiving sort of a more equitable treatment in the clean energy economy. But over the past few years, there has been a lot of discussion regarding this desire. How, I guess, Representative Diddick, how does CEJA attempt to address issues of equity? And also Ms. Walling at the same time, and Carrie, when you want to join in as well. How do, you know, communities that have been experienced disinvestment, underinvestment, or been excluded for economic opportunity in the past, such as Black, Indigenous, people of color, foster alumni, people who are 18 years of age now or older, who've been in the foster care system, and for returning members from the criminal justice system. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, so that's, you know, like I said, that's a very important aspect of the bill. And, you know, I guess, you know, I'll talk about why I think it's so important. You know, there's, if you look at places where coal plants are located, where, you know, other facilities like that are located, they are disproportionately located in low-income minority communities. And that historically has not been by accident. They were chosen to go there because the people making the decisions about where facilities that have negative externalities, like the pollution and dirty air, dirty water, that the decisions were made over the past years to locate those in low-income and minority communities. So those are the communities that have borne the brunt of our previous and our current reliance on some of these dirty forms of energy. So when we're talking about just transition, you know, those are the communities that have been harmed the most by our reliance on dirty forms of energy. So as we are transitioning into cleaner, more sustainable forms of energy, we need to make sure that those communities are not left behind, and that we are assertively and very purposefully investing in those communities. So as all these additional resources come to our state, as more businesses invest in our state, as this green energy economy expands, that it is a matter of social justice for those communities to enjoy those benefits to as great of extent as possible.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, would you like to add anything to that? Or, I guess, what provisions will ensure job training and business opportunities for those communities?
Sure. Let me just give a brief rundown of some of the provisions that are in the bill related to clean jobs, workforce, and contractor equity. It does create a clean jobs workforce hub network for training BIPOC members and in 16 different sites, which includes, the South Side, Chicago, Southwest. So there's a bunch of different sites. It also creates a place to expand entrepreneurship and contractor incubator. That often is one of the issues with equity and diversity is contractors. You can have workers that are working directly on the site be folks that might diversify and then not do anything about the small business and contractor entities, and that doesn't help with diversity at all. There's also funding in it to have grants for removing capital, removing the lack of capital to BIPOC businesses, sort of a little bit modeled off of cannabis in terms of restitution for, and this is off of ComEd utility misconduct. And then there are job training programs that are funded. Some of them are in the Department of Corrections, and a green bank to serve as low interest and zero interest loans to minority business enterprises, BIPOC contractors, and businesses serving those communities. Energy financing program, clean energy, climate, and jobs plan overall, and just overall funding. And I will say, we did have a lot of things that we learned from passing CEJA. I think that CEJA did a good job of training hundreds of workers, most of which were minority in those particular training programs. But there are still a ton of issues, and we've highlighted some of them. Contractors and business ownership by BIPOC people, definitely an issue that we need to address. But then also, in some of the job training programs, we talk here about foster alumni and returning members from the criminal justice system. And in both of those sectors, we can have job training programs that we put together, but there still can be workforce barriers to those programs, to those folks that are foster alumni or people who are leaving the criminal justice system. And those can be things that are not things you think of traditionally related to a job training program. So do you need boots? Do you need books? Do you need transportation? Do you need childcare? What are the wraparound services that you're going to need to participate in this particular job training program and be successful once you're hired? And so those are things that we contemplate within in CEJA. And there's also a number of things that increase programs for low-income people as well, whether it's increasing the Illinois Solar for All program or increasing services in terms of energy efficiency, programs for low-income customers. So lots of really neat things that are within the bill that really seek to repair a lot of the damage that has been done by dirty fossil fuel industries that have been preying on these communities for so long.
And Ms. Sligerson, I want to get you in on this because you wrote a book about communities that are have been affected by pollution and the like. What have been their concerns, and what are they hoping or demanding to be an outcome from CEJA?
I mean, that question just kind of highlights what the challenges are. Like, probably, vast majority of people in Chicago or other cities and towns in Illinois who fit these, who are the targets of increasing equity, probably have no idea that CEJA exists. And, especially with the pandemic and violence and just, job issues, all the things that people are struggling with. It's hard enough for us who get paid to work in the energy sector to even begin to understand something like CEJA and all the related issues. So to really, reach out to people that might be able to fill these jobs or that might be able to take advantage of clean energy on their home or through community solar. it's just a humongous job and involves working with all these community organizations and community leaders who may not have had energy as part of their portfolio in the past, and who also have all these other demands on their time. So a lot of going back to CEJA, probably even before then, actually I wrote that book about closing the coal plants, collaboration and often uncomfortable and painful interactions between community and grassroots organizations and larger energy and environmental groups. You know, that's been going on for a long time, and a lot of really pretty amazing progress has been made and relationships built. But just being able to, you know, and also CEJA, when you're talking about a lot of these companies and these jobs, and even the solar that's the focus of CEJA, as opposed to some of the other bills, it's all very decentralized and relatively small. So you're talking about a lot of, I'm not saying the goals or anything are small, but you're talking about a lot of small companies, you know, training individual workers one by one, prioritizing solar for, you know, individual homes and communities. So, you know, that's great. That's part of what is so wonderful about this approach, but it also means it's that much more complicated to connect those companies and those people and those smaller solar customers. So I think, you know, getting equity in the country as a whole is this humongous challenge that we may never meet. So it's not a reason not to do it. And, you know, again, I think it's so interesting and exciting what CEJA is trying to do, and will not be easy, but will be great to see how it unfolds.
Well, so just to further drill down on these issues of environmental justice, you know, and support for impacted communities. There are many of these communities dealing with fossil fuel-based pollution, such as coal plants being in their backyard. I guess the next thing is how does CEJA provide for cleaning up polluted communities? And how do investments in clean energy help solve this problem? What are some of the provisions that do that? Ms. Wallen, would you like to take that one first?
Sure. So I outlined a little bit of where some of those provisions were. I'm just checking this out. You know, just in terms of like the Illinois Solar for All program, for example, and an increased investment in energy efficiency. You know, and we've talked about the different transition programs that support frontline communities that have coal plants in them. So there's definitely a ton in terms of environmental justice and workforce training. You know, like basically every provision has things like you know, like I said, the Solar for All, an equity point system with respect to renewable energy systems, with energy efficiency, expanding the low-income energy efficiency funds. Kind of a cool thing with energy efficiency that we're really excited about is requiring utilities to also have health and safety funds for energy efficiency, because one of the things that we found in doing the energy efficiency programs is sometimes there are quick fixes that either help the contractor do efficiency more quickly or provide for the safety of the resident. Things like they'll go into homes and the electricity just is unsafe and you can't do efficiency if you can't fix the box. Or they'll go into homes and there'll be carbon monoxide pouring out of some vents into the home, and it's a $20 fix to, you know, vent that somewhere. You know, the contractor can't do that. So there's all sorts of things for low income and environmental justice communities impacted by pollution contained throughout the bill, basically in every section, which is really exciting. And we're also really excited to have environmental justice organizations writing the bill and at the negotiating table with more mainstream environmental groups. So that is really exciting to see the communities at the table instead of on the table like they normally are.
Sure. Representative Deitich, would you like to add in?
Yes. So, you know, when we're talking about impacted communities, I think it's also important to keep in mind that, you know, we talk, you know, for most of this presentation, we've talked in a very positive sense about transitioning from things like reliance on coal to things like reliance on solar. But it's important to be cognizant that there are costs in a lot of communities when places like coal plants disappear, right? You know, lots of people rely on coal plants for jobs. They are often a significant source of property tax revenue for the local schools and the other local governments. So, you know, on the margins, you know, it is certainly moving our state in a positive direction to transition from coal to clean energy. But we want to also, be very cognizant that there are people who are going to pay the costs of us transitioning away from coal as well. So we want to make sure that we're investing in those communities, providing job transition programs, and doing it as fair as a way as possible. That's one of, I think later we're going to talk a little bit more about the political ramifications and the kind of the state of play in Springfield. But that's one of the challenges that we have passing this bill is, we have a lot of legislators in the General Assembly that are very supportive of clean energy initiatives. But in a lot of their communities and their districts, this is going to potentially end up costing people jobs instead of increasing jobs. So that's something we're trying to be very aware of and address to the best as we can in bills like this.
Okay. One of the things that's sort of talking about some of these impacted communities, like how do some of those groups or organizations get more access to have their, voice heard by political leaders or governmental regulatory agencies during implementation and regulation of CEJA? Representative Didich.
Yeah, so I think an aspect of CEJA that is going to end up having a very positive impact in that regard is creating these 16 different hub sites. Right now, if you want your voice heard in Illinois government, you have to go to Springfield, and we have some agencies that operate out of Chicago. But outside of that, it can be not accessible for a lot of people. But by establishing these 16 hub sites throughout the states, in Waukegan, Rockford, Danville, Carbondale, East St. Louis, the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago. I think that is partially designed to create a much more accessible framework where people in these historically impacted communities are going to have actual storefronts, actual office buildings within the communities that they live in, providing these sorts of services to people. I think when those 16 hub sites are up and running, it's going to see a very positive impact as far as accessibility.
Okay. And so talking about, sort of like those fossil fuel phase outs, I guess the question that I have on this is like, what do we do to complete that process of phasing out these coal burning plants or other fossil fuel sort of based power generation or mining? And how do we do that? And what's the mechanism for doing so and making sure that, the communities are involved and that they feel like that they've got something that's going to come to them that's where they're not just going to be abandoned? Either Ms. Wallen or Representative Didich.
Yeah, I mean, the representative can handle this pretty well too. Just, I think that is a lot of the points of what we've been talking about in terms of all of the different job transition programs. I mean, just to illustrate the point, nearly a quarter of Illinois' coal capacity closed at the end of 2019 through the closure of 4 Vistra plants. And there's a lot of awful stuff there because the Rauner administration pushed these rules through the Pollution Control Board that actually allowed Vistra to close some of the cleanest coal plants in Illinois first. But a quarter of the coal capacity closed at the end of 2019. And the workers were told you have 30 or 60 days that you're going to be out of work by, like, they didn't know. And that's how much time they were given. And right at Christmas is basically when a lot of these things fit. So like, it's really like, it's a terrible Hallmark movie where a coal community loses all of its jobs at a certain point in time. And of course, a lot of these plants, they may be something that is a big economic engine for the town, but a lot of the ones that closed were maybe 30 to 50 workers. Whereas when you're talking about some of these nuclear plants, it could be, 1,000, or some of the larger coal plants, it can be a lot more workers. But Yeah, I mean, like that is the opposite of what we want. That is the antithesis of where this bill needs to go. We need to make sure that communities, that these programs are funded, that there is a plan in place, and that these close in an orderly manner in which we can support the communities where they are located.
Representative Deitch, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, that's a very thorough explanation. And, kind of tying together some of the things we were talking about before, there is oftentimes a lot of overlap between the communities that are going to have places like coal plants closed down that are historically underinvested communities too. Waukegan is the perfect example, where there's a coal plant there that eventually is going to close down. It also is a community that is has a significant African American community, significant Latino community, and has large pockets of poverty that are the result of historical underinvestment, environmental racism, the types of things that we're trying to solve with this bill. So there's a lot of overlap sometimes between these transition communities and these underinvested communities, and that's what we're trying to solve. And I think this bill was written in a very, very thoughtful way. So we create these types of resources, we create oversight mechanisms and accountability mechanisms. So a couple decades from now, I think we'll see a very positive impact in places like Waukegan.
Okay. And just sort of, we've talked a little bit about job development and training. And I guess one of the things that sort of talk further about that is people who are going to be sort of categorized as displaced workers. What does basically, how does CEJA provide for that job training? There's like a bunch of different, clean energy empowerment zones. There's this displaced energy worker bill of rights. How does that work? And how does that work with people who are going to be losing their jobs in these industries?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about the displaced energy worker bill of rights, because I think that's an interesting component to this bill. Some of the things it'll provide workers notification 2 years in advance if there's going to be a plant or a mine closure, career services resources, financial planning services, scholarships to public universities and community colleges if they want to further their education, provide training in other sectors. Plant and mine operators required to provide new employment information, 1 year of health insurance, protection for their retirement accounts, all the sorts of things that we want to do to mitigate the harm caused to people when their plants or their mines are closing. And it's not something we have in our state right now. I think it'll have a very positive impact, certainly mitigate the harms that people have when they are displaced by these plant and mine closures.
Okay. I guess the other thing I'm curious about with this is, going into once people do get these notifications that their jobs are going away, is there provisions there for them to transition towards, if they choose to those particular job training programs? How will those hubs work with it? Ms. Welling, would you like to take that?
So a lot of those hubs are located in areas that are accessible to the different coal plant communities. So that's something that's helpful, but also just, an investment in those communities, whether it's, like we said, paying for property taxes, et cetera. But the clean energy workforce hubs are also just beyond job transition. They're just for overall training workers into the renewable energy sector. But I do think in terms of those job transition, I mean, we do have to be careful in thinking that coal plant workers are going to want to go be solar plant are going to want to go install solar panels. Some of them are older, nearing pensions. Some of them just there isn't a real equivalent. Like the solar job is not going to make you as much money as your coal job is making you, as we said. So I think having access to training just even beyond entering the renewable energy sector is super important as well. So those are all things that we think about in terms of the job transition.
Ms. Liderson, you've seen, from the people who are living in those communities and what they're experiencing, because I imagine some of the people who live in those communities and who are facing the pollution, but also maybe also facing the phase outs because they happen to live close by. What has been their experience, and what has been their sort of fears and concerns as this transition occurs, especially for people who are in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, with the coal plants, in a lot of cases, the workers don't actually live around the plant, which sort of furthers the environmental justice because the people getting the pollution don't even have those jobs. Nonetheless, those workers, still need a job if they're still working age and the plant's closing. Same with the mines. I mean, there's all kinds of environmental impacts from the mines, but and the mines, as Jen mentioned, aren't necessarily feeding Illinois coal plants. So phasing out coal in Illinois won't necessarily close those mines, but mines are reducing staff and production and closing around the country in coming years and past years. So, I mean, like Jen and Representative Didich said, it's just, if you make those hubs available and do the best outreach possible, not only to displaced workers, but to workers in general who've been left out of the clean energy economy, that's what you have to do. You can't really force or convince coal sector workers to go into this economy. And, I have a feeling that not a whole lot of them will necessarily do that. And so it's just another one of the challenges that face not only this bill, but our whole state. And the other part, it's worth mentioning the organized labor component, which, a lot of renewable energy and just a lot of the good jobs that are left in Illinois are union jobs. And there's these different competing bills out there, and different factions of organized labor support different bills. And regardless of where the different unions or coalitions shake out on any given bill, it is going to be really important to have a pipeline for displaced coal workers and just marginalized workers in general into labor unions. And unions, especially in these relevant trades, have had a big problem with equity and racism in the past. So as part of these bill negotiations, they've promised to address that, and hopefully they will, because just fighting for good jobs in general in Illinois, even outside of the energy sector, will be really important. Not only good jobs, but a good safety net will be probably the most important thing to helping the displaced workers, and to really making this this energy transition work for everyone.
Well, the one thing that in that part of that transition is wages and equitability with those wages, and people being able to make a living, and be able to have what does it guarantee, or how does it work to, if not guarantee, but provide for the ability for people to have living wages, and for people to get paid prevailing wages? Representative Didich.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Jen, you could answer. Are there provisions in the bill that require prevailing wages?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out, I think most of them relate to more of the utility scale. Require energy efficiency vendors to pay employees at or above the prevailing wage is one of them, but there are also some items in renewable energy, et cetera. Like new governor, under CEJA, the prevailing wage portions were removed by Governor Rauner. So, the ability to make a fair wage in the community where you're located is a really important one.
Would that get tied in with like state minimum wage laws? Or I guess I'm just trying to understand how, because if you're making a lot of money as a coal worker, but you don't know where you're going to go for your next job, but if what's available is, let's say, a solar installation job, how does that work?
Yeah, well, prevailing wage is usually like it's the prevailing wage for the community where you're located. Unfortunately, in a lot of those coal communities, the prevailing wage is going to be pretty low. So, I mean, you'd be heading towards maybe something that's maybe more an IBW worker, somebody doing electrical that might be more equivalent to a coal plant worker. But you know, some of these other jobs, you know, prevailing wage is not going to be sufficient for some more of the senior and advanced folks in trade in the trades labor. So I don't want to be paint too rosy of a picture that we're going to provide an equivalent solar or wind job for every coal plant worker, but the reality is that those workers are losing their jobs at a really high rate now. And a lot of those downstate communities are really being devastated not only by coal plant closures, by the loss of other manufacturing jobs. Um, so we got to provide something. And I think that the plan we put together will be a great economic benefit for these communities overall. But, you know, I don't want to make promises that it's going to be exactly equivalent for every worker, but it will be economic investment in the state.
Okay. So while it's great to talk about all the provisions in CEJA, what's equally important is the need to just organize, mobilize, and advocate for its passage. We've talked a little bit about you know, the coalition in favor, which is, you know, a lot of it has been organized by the Illinois Environmental Council. Can you, Ms. Wallen, can you talk a little bit about the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition? How was it formed, and who's all part of it? What's the breadth of the coalition?
Yeah, so there are hundreds of different organizations involved in the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which was, I think we started it now in like 2014 or 2015. It includes environmental justice groups, public health groups, social justice groups, businesses, business organizations, some labor organizations like SEIU Local 1. So a huge range of different organizations that are committed to the Clean Energy Jobs Act and energy policy that really benefits the climate. So awesome stuff. And I think 350 Chicago, you guys are members. And you know, we've been working with that coalition to get community support for this bill for a while. And there's a lot we need to do, but we're hopeful.
Carrie, I know you've reported on all these different groups that have been, you know, working on it. At the Energy News Network. Seems like you've been chronicling the momentum of the movement towards a clean energy economy. How has this momentum gathered over the past decade of your reporting?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, you know, CEJA and the years in the lead up to CEJA, like they both described, and, you know, the several years of CEJA and these other bills, the follow up to CEJA being debated. I mean, the momentum's huge. I think, you know, it's, I mean, there's at least 3, and depending how you know, define bills, 4 or 5 or more bills proposed out there. And, you know, I know everyone's in all kinds of negotiations, and with so many components, it does seem like most people agree that if there's going to be an energy bill, you know, on one hand, there's this need to fix the solar cliff that Jen mentioned and get some money to jumpstart the solar economy. But other than that, it seems like most people seem to agree that, you know, this needs to be a big, ambitious energy bill, and it needs to be done as well as possible the first time, or this isn't the first time, but when it is passed. So yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. I'm not in those negotiations. I'm just lucky to get some insight from the people involved here and there. But I can only imagine it's just a huge and really lengthy process. And I would hope that, you know, because there's competing bills, whatever ends up passing becomes stronger, you know, even stronger because of all the different people that are at the different tables and how those things will ultimately converge in some piece of legislation.
And, you know, since we've talked a little bit about coalition, what about is there people who are opposing this? Who are they? You know, groups that are trying to weaken it or stop it or retrench or roll back energy policy. Ms. Wallen, could you sort of address that? Who are they?
Everybody, no, I'm just kidding. There are some significant opponents, and I see in the question somebody had asked about the Climate Union Jobs Act and the Path to 100. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to go into some of those proposals right now, but there are a number of different both packages or single energy item legislation that are out there. So the Clean Energy Jobs Act, we've talked about, super comprehensive. The Path to 100 Act is really written by a number of solar developers, and a number of the provisions of the Path to 100 Act are incorporated in CEJA, but we don't think that the Path to 100 Act is comprehensive enough. And we also, a lot of the ways that the Path to 100 Act is paid for is through removing some of the consumer protections that would cap the cost of renewable energy, which we're really concerned about consumers as well. So those are some things that just overall are an issue. But Ameren has a bill. Ameren's bill is just awful. Like, gets rid of basically the whole solar program. Ameren is the downstate energy utility. And then Vistra, which is one of the coal plant companies, they're so fun. They have this proposal that would replace all of their coal plants with solar, except that the ratepayers would 100% pay for all of the solar to go at the coal plants rather than the company. So that's, yeah, yuck. So that's the Vistra proposal. And then the Climate Union Jobs Act is by Climate Jobs Illinois, which is a group of labor unions that are kind of considered the coalition of the willing labor unions who are interested in moving forward. There's a lot of trades labor that is really interested in renewable energy. There are a few that aren't, because there are plants that would close. But the Climate Union Jobs Act is really a labor-based bill that it does keep the nuclear plants open. It does have some things for ComEd because they are very supportive of the different jobs at ComEd. And then it includes a lot of job transition stuff as well, including some of our language that is on job transition. So that's kind of exciting in that path. But there's a lot of big proposals out there. There's different players. There's new influencers in basically every position of leadership that will need to get this done. And so it is a little bit Wild West, but I do think in terms of co-sponsors, in terms of people knowing about it, Clean Energy Jobs Act absolutely has the most support. And I think we're in a position where all the other players are trying to get added to the work that we want to get done.
Great. Yeah, I was curious because I know there's how many different sponsors are there, or co-sponsors?
I don't know how many we've moved over, but at the end of last session, we were almost at 60. And it's HB 804, nice. SB 1718 are the bills. I could look that up while we are speaking, but I don't know if we've moved everybody over yet. Yeah, there's like a lot. Like, I'm not even going to count this in front of all of you. It's a lot.
Well, just sort of talking a little bit more about that opposition. Ms. Larson, you've chronicled, what dark money groups have been trying to do. What have you learned about those dark money groups, such as the Clean Energy Transition Project? What are they doing? What is their game?
Yeah, I mean, there's, it's really inherent in the dark money system, hard to figure out exactly what they're doing. And there's definitely fossil fuel interests, opposed to this transition happening in Illinois and the way Illinois could be a model for other states. So, and I mean, clearly with coal, at least, they're just playing a losing game, and, it's happening regardless. I mean, I think it is, if we're talking about big corporations in opposition, it's only fair to mention that the nuclear plants are a really big part of this debate and part of what, part of the controversy. The CEJA and the union coalition's bill would keep, as Jen said, keep the nuclear plants open by kind of, without getting into details, offering supports for the nuclear plants. And there's, definitely been debate about whether that's actually necessary to keep them open. I mean, there's debate over whether they need to be kept open. It's probably clear that at least some of them need to be kept open, but, would they actually close if they don't get what they want, like they did in CEJA? A linchpin to getting CEJA passed was supports for the nuclear plants, and then they sort of came back, Exelon wanting more. So, that's definitely some of the controversy or opposition to some of these bills. And but I mean, going back to, dark money and fossil fuels, they're clearly trying to have an impact. But my understanding is some coal interests tried to change CEJA at the last minute to get supports for the coal plants, and that fell flat on its face. You know, I think the fossil fuels era is definitely waning in terms of their power in this debate.
So sort of, I guess the final thing is sort of like, you know, is getting more people to organize, coordinate, mobilize, and work together to ensure the passage of CEJA. You know, what actions can be taken, you know, to make this manifest. One of the things that, you know, I think we've, when we were first started organizing this event, Ms. Walling, you had talked about Lobby Day. Can you talk about what it is, when it happens, how do you do it?
Oh my gosh, I would love to. And I will put a link in the chat. I know there are a number of people from your organization already signed up. Maybe say hi in the chat if you've already signed up. This year we're doing another virtual lobby day. I don't know if people are doing in-person lobby days, although I'm seeing some receptions and stuff this week, and I'm like, that does not seem safe. Yeah, April 26th, it's a Monday. We are going to have our virtual lobby day. I'm super excited about it. Last November, we had like 1,000 people participate, which was just so fun. And it's also really fun that we've gotten a lot more diverse participants. I think there are a lot of people who really like, they can't get on the bus, they can't take the day off. And so it's really difficult. So doing these virtual lobby meetings are a ton of fun. And, you know, we did already a teach-in that we recorded. You can get it on our website of about CEJA. We are doing more than CEJA. We're doing, it's really an environmental justice lobby day. There's environmental justice permitting and also lead service line replacement, which are really important issues to the environmental justice community that we will include for lobby day. So I'm super excited about it. So I hope you will join. It's, like I said, it's more than just CEJA. We really need you. These are really hard things to get done. Having the people power really makes a difference. On some of the days that we've done lobby days, we've gotten more co-sponsors than any other day of the year. So please come. Even if you think your lawmaker is super into the environment, super not into the environment, like, come on in. And you know, you really don't need to be a technical expert in the bill. The expectation is that you'll be there to share your story. So this is why renewable energy is important to me. I mean, I'm a team guide, and last time I had a Republican who is in DuPage County and just had a ton of people on it, and each of them shared a totally different story about some of them about electric vehicles, some of them about the solar panels on their home, some of them about working in the industry. And like, we didn't even plan that group of people, but I was just really in awe by the people that were able to get to show up and just be like, hey, Senator, you really need to sign on to this bill. And so I hope that all of you will sign up, because we need you. And it's, you know, you should be flexible that entire day between 9 and 5. But in reality, you know, there'll be a little rally and you'll probably have an hour or two of visits or less. So just keeping that in mind when you are there for the day. And it is really hard to schedule, though. We don't quite know when a lot of the meetings will be. So you'll just need to, like, you probably don't need to take the day off, but like, you may have to take some breaks at like different times when the meetings may be. So I'll put the link in the chat, but I'm super excited about it. Please register. Love to have you at the event.
Great. Representative Didek, I know that there's been, we sent out a notice for people to fill in witness slips for people to, make their voice heard about the legislation. I know sometimes those open and sometimes those close. How do we find out when they open again? Or
right,
when?
You're right. So you can file a witness slip for any bill that's been posted for a committee. Normally a bill has to be posted about a week in advance. Sometimes if it's an amendment, it's a shorter time frame. But you can start submitting witness slips anytime a bill is posted for hearing in committee. And I'll give a little background on why witness slips are kind of an important form of advocating in the legislature. So when we're in our committee meetings, we each have an iPad. Each of the legislators has an iPad in front of us. And when a bill's up for hearing, we can read the text of the bill. We can click on the other tab, which is the analysis of the bill that our staff writes for us. And then on the next tab is the witness slips. And when you click the witness slip tab, the screen comes up with two big buttons, who supports the bill and who's filed the witness slip opposed to the bill. And it tells us the number of people who have filed for each, the support and the opposition. And we notice when there's a large number of people who have filed either support or opposition, right? So that can send a very strong signal to us as legislators on which issues there are grassroots support for or grassroots opposition for when there are a large number of witness slips filed for a bill.
And, just as far as like contacting representatives and senators, is it good to do that, ask them to co-sponsor or thank them for co-sponsoring?
Yeah, so, we vote on hundreds of bills a year. There's thousands of bills that get filed each year, and we get outreach on almost none of them, right? So when we do get outreach, especially from multiple people, even more especially multiple constituents who live in our district, that's something that we notice, and it's something we take seriously. Anytime a constituent asks me to co-sponsor a bill, I take a look at the bill and I see if it's something I can support, and if it is, then I sign on as a co-sponsor. So yeah, the answer is yes. If you're, especially if your representative or your senator has not signed on as a co-sponsor yet, definitely reach out to them and ask them. The worst that can happen is they say no, but if you don't ask, then you never know what might happen. So yeah, that is a great way to try to build support for this legislation.
And what's the best way to do it? Is it like phone calls, postcards, online correspondence? What's the best way to do it?
Yeah, so every legislator probably has different preferred modes of communication that they respond to best. So I think my best advice would just be all of the above. Go to our website. Sometimes we'll have a page that says give feedback on a bill. You can fill out a form on the page. Sometimes we'll have an email address that you can write to. Call our office. In my office, we prefer the emails and the online correspondence, just because I only have two people who work in my physical office, and if we start getting a lot of phone calls, it can start paralyze the work we're doing. So certainly email and online correspondence is what my office prefers. But no, all of the above. If we're not hearing from you, then we're not hearing from you, right? We don't know what you care about. So you have to make your voice heard somehow, and any way you can do that is something that's helpful.
Great. Just before we go to the Q&A, I wanted to sort of make a few announcements about some of the activities that 350 Chicago will be doing over the next couple of weeks. The first one is our monthly informational meeting, April 10th at 10 a.m. We're going to have our special guest will be Benjamin Van Horn from Green Line Homes, who will be talking about sustainable homes and how to, what they are, how they're built, all sorts of information about how to even, live in one. And so we'll have him at this Saturday, April 10th at 10 a.m. On the 14th, we're going to be hosting a community solar presentation. Andrew Barnett from the Impact team will be our guest for that. And you'll be able to learn how to support a solar farm. What is a solar farm? How do you, get in, how do you get involved with the solar farm, and how do you support one? And then lastly, we're going to have our Earth Day Trivia Night fundraiser. It's going to be our first one. It's going to be April 22nd from 7 to 8 p.m. Lots of fun, cool prizes. We're going to hold it on Zoom, so everybody's going to be safe. And so we're looking forward to that. And now we'll go ahead and go to the Q&A. Melissa has been taking some of the questions, and she's going to moderate this aspect of it. So.
Yeah. So thank you all. This has been so informative. I've really enjoyed it. So I just want to thank you personally. So we have 3 questions in the Q&A. So the first one is from Christine, and she says, private industry and trade unions have benefited from a fossil fuel economy that has disproportionately harmed communities of color. And governments on all levels have had a hand in creating and sustaining this economy. How in this context can private industry, trade unions, and governments object to equity programs, effectively buttressing systemic racism? And how can we call them out?
Yeah, I mean, this is real, and it's something, we work a lot with Blacks and Green that they have very much called out trade unions on, and especially if this is something that has to be a deal between labor and environmental groups. Just trade unions have barred people of color from their ranks forever, or not provided them the apprenticeships or resources that they needed to enter. And I think so. I think just in looking at the rest of this question, I do think that there's a lot within CEJA that we really do try to address systemic racism, whether it's diversity requirements, et cetera. And there are some, like constitutional challenges to, for example, like you can't write a bill that's like 30% of the jobs have to go to people of color. There has to be, under the Constitution, a disparity study done. And that's something that I think we both have in the bill, and like we're getting started within DCO so that we can have that to work on, to have the disparity study so we can address it. So that's just an example of how we'd be addressing diversity, but we can't do it as strongly as we'd like to. Yeah, I hope I answered that question acceptably, but I don't know if others want to contribute.
No, that's a good answer, and I mean that question gets to really to the heart of what we're trying to do, and everything we've talked about today. It's a very challenging problem to solve. It's a very big problem, but that's why we've put forward such a big bill that does lots of big things to try to solve those problems.
Okay, great, thank you. Babette has our next question. How will CEJA address the loss of local tax base with closure of fossil fuel and nuclear plants?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and the answer is that there's a provision of the bill that provides direct financial assistance to units of local governments that have been impacted by closures that result in local property tax revenue. It provides up to $100 million annually in financial assistance to local governments that are in these clean energy empowerment zones. So that is a pretty significant provision that will mitigate that loss of revenue that's for those local services that that's how our schools are funded. It's how our villages and municipalities, our park districts, our libraries. So the bill will create a very significant investment in those empowerment zones that are facing those loss of revenue problems.
Okay, great, thank you. And this is from James. So this is for Professor Leiderson. She says, hello. You wrote about the factory sit-down strike at the Republic Windows and Doors factory in Chicago in the book Revolt on Goose Island several years back. The workers there eventually converted the factory into a UE, unionized worker-owned cooperative that produces energy-efficient windows. Are there any specific aspects of the just transition in CEJA that involves subsidizing or assisting conversion of existing businesses into or creation of new unionized worker-owned enterprises in the clean energy sector? He says, similar perhaps to the Just Transition program that the Social Movement Network Cooperation Jackson in Mississippi has advocated. I'll start with that one.
Yeah. I mean, just to sort of address it on a more general level, thanks for the question, James. I mean, the just transition elements of CEJA are pretty amazing. The amount of thought and effort that went into the equity and just transition in this bill, and I was talking about how hard it will be, but it's pretty incredible what is laid out on the just transition front. And I assume that, both in the drafting of the bill and then more importantly, once a bill that has just transition components starts to take effect and play out, people involved will be looking at all different models. And there's really a vibrant just transition movement all around the country in coal-related communities. A lot of stuff going on in Appalachia in the South, as you mentioned. So, this is part of a larger national movement where different organizations and elected officials and entities are learning from each other's best practices and, just trying to figure it out as we go along and as this shift happens. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And then there was another question too. Are there any provisions for something like municipal ownership of clean energy production, manufacturing, utilities to build democratically governed community wealth while transitioning to 100% renewable infrastructure?
Yeah, so I know, there is, especially a lot of the democratized ComEd, right? And I think that there is a lot, particularly in a progressive community, that can be done with municipal ownership of different utilities. But let me tell you the horror story of what can happen with municipal utilities, which is that there are 42 municipal utilities in Illinois, as well as a number of rural electric co-ops. And all of those are owned and democratically, the municipal utilities are democratically electing the aldermen that make decisions about energy. And those communities got together a little less than 10 years ago and built the biggest carbon source in the state of Illinois, the biggest carbon source to be built in the last 20 years, which is the Prairie State Energy Campus. So, I just will say there aren't things that will speed up the democratization or municipal ownership of utilities. I mean, there are things in place to do that now, but, I would just I want to support that because that's a good idea. But literally my first job was trying to stop these communities. And I think, even within those communities, there were a lot of ethics issues where this Prairie State Energy Campus, a lot of them were working with municipal elected officials, campaign contributions, a lot of ethics issues. And not only are these communities bound until 2035 to 2041 to the biggest carbon source in the state, a lot of them are paying 150 to 200% more in power costs than the communities around them. So definitely we head towards municipal ownership of our utility within, for example, the city of Chicago. I would definitely like to see a lot of ethics requirements, et cetera, because, even with our aldermen right now, we do a lot of city council work. The aldermen in the city of Chicago, only 12 of them voted against the mayor's air ordinance that we just opposed that didn't do enough. And only, I think, 15 of them voted to bring forward the general iron resolution. So definitely if that happens, I'd want to personally see a lot of ethics provisions for whichever body is governing the municipal unit of government. Because bad things can also happen from municipal ownership of utilities as well. And that gives me a little bit of heartburn. I just being honest.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that perspective. Yeah, we're actually hosting Democratized ComEd in our May monthly meeting to hear more about that. So yeah, maybe I can ask about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I'd personally like to see municipal ownership because there's so many things you can do, but we got to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good word of caution. Okay, so we only have 2 minutes left. Larry, do we want to do one question or should we wrap up?
Let's go ahead and wrap up. I just want to sort of say as we close tonight's forum, I again would like to thank Representative Deitich, Jennifer Welling of the Illinois Environmental Council, and professor and journalist Carrie Liderson for appearing tonight and giving us such cogent and informative answers about the Clean Energy Jobs Act. I would also like to thank everyone who joined us as attendees from across Illinois who came to listen to tonight's forum. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for that. And good night, everybody. Have a good night and a good weekend.
Thank you too, Larry, for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.